The thing that's just been bothering the hell out of me is the fact that these guys are wearing masks with no identification whatsoever. And they're thugs. They are thugs, and I'll add to that, cowards.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. We are dialing in on military news, both in American streets and abroad on today's show. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, particularly on the legal front, including the dramatic resignations in Minnesota of prosecutors who are refusing DOJ pressure to investigate the widow of Renee Nicole Good, I guess, for talking to ICE officers inappropriately. Just disgusting what we're seeing on the DOJ, but good on those prosecutors for resigning. Much more on that and all the other stuff in the legal news over on our new-ish podcast, Illegal News with Sarah Longwell. This is our relaunch of George Conway Explains It All, since George is running for Congress. You heard George on this show last week. He was pretty hot. And we're going to keep the legal news going, though, or the illegal news in this case. Sarah's getting a rotating cast of sharp experts. She's got Andrew Weissman and others to break everything down. The new episode's out today with Asha Rangappa, who I've got to know recently and I love. So go check out the illegal news over on YouTube, Substack, or your podcast app of choice. On this show, he's back. He's a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General. He was commander during the 2007-9 troop surge in Iraq. He's also commanding general of the U.S. Army Europe. He writes on military affairs for the Bulwark. It's Mark Hertling. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Tim. Good to be with you. And if I can just reinforce what you just said about Asha Rangappa, she's awesome. I've gotten to know her really well over the last couple of years, and a brilliant legal mind. She's really great.
She is. And, you know, while we're glazing people, just having you here is just amazing. I feel so lucky to have you with us at the Bulwark. For people a little behind the scenes, it's a little weird, I would say, to have a commanding general of U.S. Army Europe sitting through our Monday meeting where we're discussing whether to do a blog post on the Groypers or reading the Slack discussions about buccal fat removal. But we're here. We are there. You're in all of it. You're diving straight in, and we appreciate you.
I've been in staff meetings that have been much worse, so everything's going fine.
All right. We have so much to cover. I want to start with Tuesday's Morning Shots. Your section was called Masks, Courage, and Accountability. And you wrote about kind of your experience with the Iraqi police and masks and kind of some lessons from that and how it relates to what we're dealing with now with these masked ICE and CBP agents roaming the streets. So I want to just kind of let you cook on that for folks who missed the newsletter.
Yeah, Tim, I tell you, watching these guys, these ICE officials who we don't know how they're recruited, we don't know how they're trained. There's stories now popping up about some lapses in even vetting them. Another story about some of them being January 6th participants. All those we'll let the media take care of. But the thing that's just been bothering the hell out of me is the fact that these guys are wearing masks with no identification whatsoever. And they're thugs. They are thugs, and I'll add to that, cowards. You give me any one of those guys without a weapon and without a badge and without an association to, the federal forces, and they would be a nobody. But they're using that generated power to really influence what's going on the street in a negative way. They're countering what our Constitution says is right in terms of the freedom of speech and the right to legal protest. It's why we formed our nation and given it some of the values and ideology we have. They are just counter to everything we are. So, after watching these for a couple of months, these guys doing these kind of things, it just every time I saw them, it reminded me of the Iraqi security forces and the Iraqi police forces early on, because they would all wear masks and they would tell their commanders and the U.S. forces, well, we're wearing it because, people don't like us associating with the U.S. military. Okay, got that. But as they became more and more capable and more effective in terms of security actions, and they were doing things the right way, we noticed that both the Army and the police forces started taking those mask and kafiyas and the scars that they were wearing over their face, they were taking them off. And it was because they were generating pride in serving their country. These guys are not generating pride. They are being sent on the street to create havoc. and to violate rights. So it just infuriated me, and that's even starting to get hot talking about it. That's why I wrote the piece.
There's one anecdote in the piece that I thought was telling. You said that, that your kind of second or third time there, as things started to change, there was a billboard campaign featuring soldiers and police, Iraqi soldiers and police, smiling and proclaiming their dedication to a safe, stable environment. And I just thought that was such a telling anecdote, right? It's like they were living in an oppressive situation and where there was no trust and where we can just be honest, where the police and federal agents were corrupt. And I guess part of engendering trust, they took their masks off and then had a billboard campaign about it. I think that kind of tells you all you need to know about how backwards we're going.
And by the way, that idea for the billboard campaign was generated by the Iraqi Minister of the Interior, the guy who was in charge of police forces, kind of the equivalent of the Homeland Security Secretary. And it just was fascinating to us that they had come such a long way. I was first there in 2003 and 2004, and the next time was 2007 and 8. And what we saw was a taking of pride. And even if you see pictures of me in the second tour, I'm wearing the American flag on one shoulder and the Iraqi flag on the other, because I wanted to be associated with their security forces. And they were constantly out with our troops doing combined operations with both our police, our military police, and also, our infantry and armor and artillery guys as well. So it just showed a change of attitude. And one of the things I didn't put in the article, you go to any American city and on the side of police cars, there is the equivalent of something like "to protect and to serve," or any kind of motto like that in a local police. That's not what these guys are doing. That's not what these ICE people are doing. They're intimidating and being thugs. So it's just anathema to what we believe in terms of security forces.
The one mildly encouraging thing, and we talk a lot about a lot of bad political news around here, is people are reacting negatively to it. My friend Peter Hamby over in Puck is out with an article last night, just kind of analyzing the polling around ICE. And after Trump's inauguration, ICE had a net favorability of plus 16. So even some people who voted for Kamala Harris had a favorable view of ICE. Yeah. Now it's underwater with a minus 14 favorability rating. It's a 30-point swing in a year. It's a dramatic political collapse in our polarized times. And I have to assume that a lot of it is related to what you're talking about. Just fundamentally, Americans, even people that voted for Trump, and just don't want our police or our security forces acting this way.
Yeah. The thing that bothers me, though, Tim, is they don't seem to care what their favorability rating is. And this is what's troubling, because I think we are at an inflection point after last week's killing where it could go one way or another. Either they could be really subdued because they realize how bad they're being seen, or they're continuing to generate these kinds of actions, which will eventually create some kind of pushback. And that is exactly what they want. They want the pushback so the president can declare the Insurrection Act. And you hear all the government officials saying, don't take the bait. That's become the mantra. That can only hang on for so long. Someone's going to be furious about what's happening, and there's going to be danger on the streets both ways. That's what's troubling to me.
So you mentioned the murder of Renee Nicole Good and that event. It's just horrible tragedy in Minneapolis. And I wanted to ask you about this because I was suffering some fools over on the Piers Morgan show yesterday. We were kind of arguing about this situation. Yeah. And I just, to me, that just seems so obvious. Like I watched that video and I'm just like, I just don't see how somebody could credibly be scared for their life after that. That sequence of events. And, but I do think I have some limited credibility on this, having never been, in law enforcement or in the military. And I just kind of was curious your perspective on that, watching all that, not necessarily getting into Jonathan Ross's head, but, you were in Iraq, you're in all these other dangerous war zones, you trained people. I just have to imagine many people who have served this country have been in much more dangerous situations than that. And thanks to their training and judgment, have not fired 3 bullets into a woman's head. And I was just kind of wondering, as you look at that from like a training perspective, how you assess that.
They're ineffective and incapable of doing what they're being asked to do. Your comment about being in Iraq, I hadn't thought about this before, but we had guards at gates that were prepared to counter suicide attacks with trucks, car-driven bombs and things like that. And even they knew the rules of you don't shoot through the windshield. You shoot to disable the vehicle. You shoot through the engine block first. And then when you have to, then you may have to kill the driver if it's approaching too fast. The ICE folks are saying, oh, this was a split second decision. And, he was fearing for his life. Anyone that sees the film knows that he wasn't fearing for his life. This was a purposeful act on his part. He wanted to kill somebody. He pulled the trigger. I mean, I can't get into his head. That's conjecture on my part. But it just shows someone who's not trained in the limited use of force, which is what security forces do. It's different when you're in combat and you're facing a threat. I mean, I'll say this publicly, Tim, and it's in my new book coming out. I've killed people at close range, and you don't like to do that. But when you have to, you do. So it's one of those kind of things that's a reflection of someone who likes bloodlust, who wants to do something like this. It doesn't matter that he was involved in another occasion that, he feared for his life a couple of months before. Each incident is different. The other thing I don't understand was why did they release the film? Why did DHS release the film of his camera showing the woman saying, yeah, I'm not mad. You don't kill somebody for that unless you have a unique insecurity and an inferiority complex and you like to use power. And those aren't the kind of people that you should have on a police force.
Just thinking about that, like you're saying, like people that are guarding the gates, it's just like so many times we've had to train people who are doing legitimate security work who, you're not even speaking the language, right? You're going into a foreign country and it's hard to know, you know what I mean? Is like this person a threat or are they just unhappy that we're here, right? Like, and you just have to use judgment in those situations and try to de-escalate. And it's just like comparing like all of the danger situations where people have chosen not to escalate to like this with a 37-year-old woman with stuffed animals in her passenger seat, like clearly turning her car away. It's just crazy, like to me.
And she was a protester. Okay, that's great. Yeah. But even if you see before the shooting what occurred, within a span of about 5 seconds, there was a get out of the car, get out of the fucking car. Well, that immediately puts someone on the defensive. And you don't want to stick around to see what's going to happen next. And that was their first approach. That's the first thing they did to her before the shooting. So you have to take the entire incident in context. And I just can't believe the people that are defending this shooting because it's not what security forces do.
This episode of The Bulwark Show is brought to you by Wildgrain. Wildgrains is the first baked from frozen subscription box for sourdough breads, artisanal pastries, and fresh pastas. Plus, all items conveniently bake in 25 minutes or less. Unlike many store-bought options, Wildgrain uses simple ingredients you can pronounce and a slow fermentation process that can be easier on your belly and richer nutrients. There's no preservatives and no shortcuts. Wildgrain's boxes are fully customizable. Let me tell you, I like the Wildgrain. We like it. I have fond memories of my mother making me cinnamon rolls. Now I can try to offer that for my child. Those frozen cinnamon rolls fresh from the fridge. Straight, those frozen cinnamon rolls, those cinnamon rolls straight out of the freezer. 25 minutes, it's a yummy. And, maybe not the most nutritious breakfast, but it's what you remember, okay? You need those fond memories as a child. You know who likes Wildgrain even more than me, if this is possible, is JVL and his 19 children. Okay, so the more children you have, the better Wildgrain is for you. But, empty nesters, you'll probably like it too. There's nothing like having an artisan bakery in your freezer to chase away the winter chill. Now it's the best time to stay in and enjoy comforting homemade meals with Wildgrain. I highly recommend giving Wildgrain a try. Right now, Wildgrain is offering our listeners $30 off your first box, plus free croissants for life when you go to wildgrain.com/thebulwark to start your subscription today. That's $35 off your first box and free croissants for life when you visit wildgrain.com/thebulwark, or you can use promo code TheBulwark at checkout. All right, I'll move on. We're going to go a little around the globe with you, and I want to start with Iran. You have an article out for us today on this, how Iran is more than just a target set. I guess I just want to start with like what we're seeing on the ground, what kind of protest and uprising this is and how this might be different than some of the other ones in the past. You write about this and kind of how we should be thinking about this, given that, there is just a really horrifying, brutal crackdown right now happening on these protesters. Yeah. We don't know a real number at this point, but, 5 figures, I think it's pretty safe to say, have been killed by the Iranian regime.
And this is different than past uprisings in Iran. I mean, the uprisings against the government are episodic. They occur all the time. This one's huge. It's large, but it's not about the policies or the religion. It's about economics. The people of Iran are in really horrible shape, and they have been for a while, and it's coming to a head. And they certainly are being suppressed by the Iranian Republican Guard, the Bajis. But, I was on a show last night talking to a guy who is an expert on the IRGC. And he basically said, you guys are talking in theoreticals. You've got to go in and kill them all. Well, the IRGC consists of estimates about 200,000 people. The Bajis consist of another 600,000. So there are those who say we've got to destroy these security forces so the regime can collapse and the uprising can occur. But that's a pretty major mission for any military force. It certainly isn't going to be conducted by bombings, which seems to be the first resort of recent presidents across the board. If we can get airstrikes in, people think we're doing something. But, when you're talking about the IRGC spread across parts of Iran, what they're capable of doing and the supporting militias they have behind them, it's a pretty big force. And even if you're lucky enough to kill all of them, which you certainly wouldn't be able to do when you're talking about 1 million people, which is more than the U.S. Army, by the way, you've got some concerns about what's going to happen next. Are the hardliners in government going to blame the great Satan for doing what they're doing and killing all these people? Certainly, the people who are protesting want to see their enforcers, the ones that are subjecting them to the death and the suffering, killed or done away with. But surgical airstrikes are not going to do that. And even beyond that, Tim, you got to take a look at who are the forces in the area. There are, the carrier strike group forward has been taken out of the Arabian Gulf and the Mediterranean to go to Venezuela.
Is crazy. I saw this morning. So we have no aircraft carriers in the Middle East at all. Because we
do have some air bases in the Middle East. But breaking news, as you just mentioned before we went on, if we're talking about Qatar, that's where our major air base is in the Middle East. And if we're bringing forces out of there, according to the presidential order,
the Reuters report, that we're removing some personnel from these bases right now. Because
that's going to knock the forces down even more. And you have another report that from Denmark that the president has asked them to assist in a campaign against Iran. This is the same Denmark he's threatening to invade as part of their Greenland holdings. So Denmark is basically saying, pound sand, we're not doing anything with you. This is what happens when you dish your allies, you pull forces out willy-nilly for other contingencies that doesn't have a major strategy, and you're basically insulting your alliances and even playing them as almost enemies because they don't either pony up cash or pony up forces or do what you want them to do by giving away their land. The last attack with Israel that went against Iran had Danish aircraft with it. I believe it had German aircraft with it, and it had French aircraft with it. So these are the 3 allies that we're now insulting. who don't want to play with us in any kind of action, especially one that might instigate a major campaign and create havoc on the European and Middle Eastern continents.
Yeah. I'm going to get into that, the European part of this, a little bit more, but just sticking with the Iran and what the options are for a second. You're talking about the limitations of airstrikes and, the risk of destabilizing Iran, which is something that you got to think about as you're looking, through the various options. I do get a little bit frustrated sometimes with because we've had, some of these failed efforts. I think it's important to learn from them, but it doesn't mean that we're helpless. I do think sometimes the opponents of getting involved have this sort of view that we should do nothing and that we have this helplessness, and there's a risk of status quo of keeping Iran.
Right.
And obviously they're cracking down on their own people, but they are funding terror groups and they're funding other organizations that try to destabilize us and our allies. So I just wonder, if you were there in the room and you're looking at the what are things that we might be able to do that could be productive, maybe short of just, kind of bombing a couple of things and saying that we helped.
That's what I laid out in the article about the elements of national power. And the major element is diplomacy, and then you have information, and then you have economic power, and then you have military power. But the first response is usually, let's use the military because it's the most forceful and you can publicize it. But have we extended a diplomatic approach to, I don't know if we have or not. If we have, it's very secretive.
It seemed like there was some contact. I just am seeing reports. Someone from the Iranian side did, at least per Trump, contacted them about restarting the nuclear deal. But who the hell knows what the seriousness of that is.
But it's beyond that. What are you doing to your population? Have we used a diplomatic approach on the world stage at the UN? Has Michael Waltz, the UN ambassador, gone up and given a speech about how we should universally condemn what Iran is doing to its citizens? Have we instigated an information campaign? Reports are saying Kerry Lake has turned off Radio Free Europe that would basically blast information into the people of Tehran. So there's not an information campaign going on. What are the economic situations? Well, parts of the economic sanctions that we've held against Iran for decades now have gone against the entire society. Is there a better way to use the economy to target key leaders of the regime, like we've recently done in some cases with Russia? Or is it just a massive, we're going to block everything? The president's announcement that if they don't stop, they're going to get another 25% tariff. Well, what is that going to do to the people who are already struggling in the economy of this nation? So
we're not really doing enough trade with Iran for a tariff to really make any difference at this point.
Right. Yeah. So all of those things and a consistent approach to the use of military power with a smart approach, in my view, is the right way to do it. You combine all elements of national power, the four elements of diplomacy, information, economics, and military, in a major campaign, and I don't think that's being done. I don't see indicators of that. In fact, I see in some cases just the opposite, that we're ignoring some elements of national power.
I do just want to mention Irfan Sultani is this 26-year-old shopkeeper in Karaj who is protesting. He's scheduled to be executed on Wednesday. Trump was asked about this by Tony DeCopel last night and basically said that if they do that execution, it's going to lead to consequences. Here's where, so my sympathies are always towards are there productive things that we can do to help the Iranian people, because what they're dealing with is just unimaginably horrible, and it's been that way for decades. The problem on that is, okay, is it imaginable that what we're going to do is productive? And I want to offer the senator from Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin, was on CNN last night with Caitlin Collins, and it's not exactly encouraging. Here are a few clips from his convo with her.
To 20,000.
So you're in favor of taking out the Iranian regime?
I am at this point. They're murdering their citizens. We're not into regime change. We're not. This isn't the Arab Spring like happened underneath Secretary Clinton. But this is the people of Iran standing up to a murderous regime. And if that leadership is going to kill their own people, the president said, we'll come to your rescue.
But you just said you are for regime change here.
No, I said I'm for the strikes. I didn't
say. You said before that you're for taking out the regime.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're the ones murdering their own people. That's different than regime change. The regime change is up to the Iranian people. We're not going actively to remove the regime. We're going after the people that are killing their own people, and that happens to be the regime.
But just to be clear, you support taking out the supreme leader.
If he's the one that's calling these airstrikes or the killings of his own people, then absolutely.
Okay, but that would be regime change.
Well, how do you decipher that one?
That's what's known as a circular argument. You can't make sense, and it's a guy that has very little experience in terms of what military force does and what happens as an after effect of taking out leaders of a country. So that should be part of the planning. It's the same thing that's occurring in Venezuela. The plan should include what happens if the regime topples. Then what do you do to support the people as opposed to just having chaos because they no longer have a government? I guess one of the things I said in that article I wrote about Iran, and it's the same thing that you say about Venezuela or any place else we go. The question shouldn't be, what should we hit? The question should be, what end state are we trying to achieve? What kind of government are we wanting to see? How are the people going to be treated? And what actions might we take that could make everything worse? And I'm suggesting that a massive bombing campaign without the other elements of national power coming to play would make things worse in Iran.
Okay, well, why don't we test that out with moving on to what was happening in Venezuela and the Monroe Doctrine. It still is pretty. It's just kind of crazy to wrap your head around the fact that we have this a limited number of ships and we moved the carrier that might be needed for if there were an emergency to happen in the Middle East over to the Caribbean for these. I don't even think we need to call them drug boat bombings anymore, because obviously that was just pretext for what they wanted to do with the coup. What is the status there now? I mean, does it seem like they're moving on? They're kind of like, okay, mission accomplished banner. We're going to send we're going to send the military personnel back to the Persian Gulf for and we're going to get the oil guys in there and hope everything's for the best, or what? Or are there other elements that you're seeing still kind of out there from the military standpoint?
Well, you're asking the questions that should have been asked beforehand. The first question: who's in charge of Venezuela right now? The president said he was. Then he pointed to four of his cabinet members and said they are. But it appears that the former vice president of Venezuela, is in charge. And the same corruption is occurring. The oil companies don't want to go in. I think that was a major surprise to the president when most of them said, it's not a smart move. We can't make any money out of this. We've already had people there. We know what the situation is like, which, by the way, also happened in Iraq when I was there in 2007, because we had the major oil facilities of Iraq in our area of operation is the Beji oil refinery and the Kurdish oil fields. And Trump at the time said he wanted to take Iraqi oil. And the oil companies, I tried to comment on CNN that the oil companies had already been in and it wasn't a money-making venture for them, so they weren't going to do it. These are the kind of questions that you ask and you plan for. So when the actual strikes take place and you snatch the leader, even though he's a very bad guy, out of the government, you kind of have a plan for who's going to take their place and what they're going to do very quickly. That doesn't seem to be occurring right now. To use your comment, it does seem like they've kind of, hey, it's over. We've done what we needed to do. And now what comes next, we're not sure. I don't know what's coming next in Venezuela. Do you?
No.
Does anybody?
Do they? I don't think so.
Do they?
Yeah.
And yet we've moved on already. We're now thinking about Iran and Greenland. So it is that scattershot of national security that is part of what they say in their doctrine. They have the ends and the means. They don't have the ways to execute a security strategy.
What do you think the internal feeling is, among kind of military leaders? We were texting about this the other day. I kind of heard through the grapevine of from somebody that was kind of a mid-level military leader that was really rah-rah about, kind of being more aggressive now in Central and South America and getting excited about the Dunroe Doctrine. You told me you were kind of hearing different things. Like, I don't know. Like, I could kind of imagine, I guess, military leaders being excited about all this. It's like, hey, we get stuff to do. I don't want to be bored. But you could also imagine the counter, which is like, what in the fuck are we doing? Like, we don't have a plan. This is crazy.
I've never been able to speak for the entire military. There are certainly some leaders that are going to say, oh, this is great. I can't wait to go to combat and all that. All I'd say is when you've been in a leadership position, you've lost a lot of soldiers in combat. It's not that exciting anymore. And in fact, it brings back that scene from Patton, where Patton and Bradley are talking to each other, and Bradley turns to Patton and says, George, the difference between me and you is you do this because you love it. I do it because it's my profession. And the professionals won't be all that excited about going to war. In fact, they train for it, they prepare for it, but they're more apt to say, let's build some alliances and deter conflict so we don't have to send our sons and daughters into harm's way.
Okay, I was up here in my podcast hole taping when I got an excited text from my husband. It was this picture, something we got in the mail. It's a huge bag of materials for making cold brew. We love cold brew in our house. Okay, I've been teaching you guys, like one by one, little by little, I've been teaching you things about the gay experience, and skinny jeans we've talked about in the past, moisturizing, face moisturizing. The other thing is cold brew. Even in the winter, the gays drink cold brew. And so we are so pumped about our new sponsor, our friends at Trade. Trade is the #1 coffee destination in the U.S. Their team of expert baristas, tasters, and Q graders use real coffee knowledge to match you with coffee you'll love. They curate over 500 coffees, so you can try something new with every delivery. Trade has spent more than a decade building relationships with 55 top roasters across the U.S., giving you access to coffees you won't find at your neighborhood shop. Each bag is roasted to order and delivered fresh to your door at prices comparable to grocery brands, but with cafe-level quality in every cup. You can take Trade's quick quiz, and they'll find you the perfect match. For me, I like them kind of fruity and natural, and just dark. Just give it to me. Okay, I want a big flavor, black, flavorful coffee. We just got our first batch of Trade, as I mentioned earlier this week, and that's great. I'm going to love trying out different flavors. My husband used to do this thing. It was like an advent calendar of coffees. This is how just kind of in it we get on the coffee front. It's like a different bean every day during the Advent season. So we're just thrilled with Trade. I'm going to be trying out the different varietals they have to offer. So right now, Trade is offering a 50% off at a 1-month trial at drinktrade.com/bulwark. That's drinktrade.com/bulwark to get 50% off 1 month. drinktrade.com/bulwark. Speaking of alliances that we are collapsing rather than building, let's go back to our friends in Europe. This was a report from a couple of days ago that Trump had ordered JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, to prepare contingency plans for a potential invasion of Greenland. I don't know if this was yesterday or this week. The Danish sent an advanced contingent of their armed forces to Greenland. So they sent more troops there. What is that request even? What is that request? If you were there and you were, part of JSOC and they're like, come up with a plan for invading Greenland, where do you even start with that?
Yeah, I've got a piece coming out probably today or tomorrow on exactly that. First of all, JSOC is not necessarily an invasion planning headquarters. They fall under SOCOM, the Special Operations Command.
Explain that how that all breaks down, Does, because
JSOC is, as we've talked about before, they are the folks that are the Delta SEAL teams, Rangers, pararescues from the Air Force, the MARSOC from the Marine Corps. They're all the special operators who train extensively on several missions, counterterrorism, abduction missions like we saw with Maduro, the kinds of things that take a hard strike and get out quickly. And they're very well trained. When you're talking about an invasion, that normally goes to a combatant commander like Southcom or Northcom, or now what they're calling Hemisphere Command, or a word something like that, where they're attempting to combine both the North America and South American command structure. So it is in their sphere of influence, just like European Command takes care of the continents. Central Command is overseeing the Middle East and others. Indo-Pacific Command is in the Pacific. So each one of them has an area of operation. JSOC is a subordinate of Special Operations Command. They are the ones that hold these guys. They're given a mission, say, go conduct a counterterrorism operation or snatch a body out of someplace, and they do it very well. But when you're talking about an invasion, you're looking at land routes, logistics operations, sea forces, air forces, and they don't do that from a bigger contingency. So just saying that JSOC had been given the mission to plan an invasion of Greenland. Greenland has about 50,000 citizens on the island. About 80% of that island is ice. So I'm not sure what an invasion looks like. Would they take over the towns of Nuuk, which is the capital of Greenland, which has, a bunch of very beautiful colored buildings? Do they reinforce what used to be called Thule Air Base on the northeastern portion of the island, which is now, I can't pronounce the name, Patafik Air Space Force Base, which is where the American forces are now on the island? I mean, I just don't know. Whenever you give a mission to invade somewhere, like World War II, Eisenhower was given a one-paragraph mission: enter the continent of Europe and defeat the Nazi war machine. What would be the mission statement? Clear mission. I don't know what the mission would be. And, enter the island of Greenland and defeat the citizens of Nuuk. I don't know. And then what do you do once you invade? What's the next action? Is it start drilling for rare earth minerals and
I think so,
and oil?
yeah.
I don't know. The excuse that's being given is to protect the Arctic region. Well, we're already doing that as part of NATO. The Danes have a key to that responsibility. So do the Canadians, who we pissed off to an extreme. And truthfully, we don't have right now in our force structure the kinds of at-scale forces that would conduct Arctic operations. We depend on our allies to the north in both Europe and the Western Hemisphere to do that, because that's why we've claimed them as allies. If we're going to start doing those kind of missions too, we're going to need a whole lot more icebreakers. It's insanity, Tim.
It is insanity.
It is insanity. There's no other word to use.
I guess maybe if I can pictures it like landing on the moon, or it's just like you land and then you put the flag down. Maybe that's what they imagine. I don't know. It's interesting. We've all had to learn about all this stuff now. You mentioned, I think it's Patufik Space Base that they have down there. Yeah. You said it used to be called Thule Air Base. But so we have one base there. We used to have a bunch, I guess, during the Cold War, but they closed those. So it's like, it's all about, Trump said it to the New York Times. He's like, I have a psychological need to own it. And that's what this is, right? Because like the military excuse is just like, it's even a stupider version of the drug trafficking excuse for Venezuela. It's like we're coming up with some reason that we need it for security, but we can have as many bases there as we want, I think. I don't think the Danes are going to care about that.
The Danes not only don't care, they've offered them. Hey, you want to reinforce your bases, the old bases you had? Knock yourself out. We'll let you do that. The Danes have said that. But invading is a whole different thing. And I guess there's a bill trying to get through the Senate right now that basically is the NATO Protection Act. The other thing that's involved here is we are attacking basically another NATO member, Denmark and its constituency on Greenland. If that happens, we have violated what would be an Article 4 constraint on any nation. When one nation attacks any NATO force, all the other NATO nations come together to counter that. So we are the ones attacking a NATO force at this point. And by the way, that NATO alliance is a congressionally mandated alliance. It was signed in 1947, and no one has taken that alliance document away saying we no longer believe in the alliance. So it is so, there's no other word but insanity on this Greenland.
Did you
thing.
ever
And
go
yet,
up there?
Yeah, I've been there twice. I've been there. I landed in Thule Air Force Base twice on the way to Europe. And a little Air Force base with enough room for one plane to land. And it's got a nice little terminal with one vending machine with candy bars in it, another one with coffee. And that's it. I mean, that is but I'm dated. That was probably 20 years ago. Yeah. But I mean, it's also, the first time I landed there, it was June and it was cold as hell up there.
I don't know. The one thing that if it was a different part of the world, you'd be thinking he's planning a golf course there. But I don't think that there's going to be kind of a Trump casino and ice fishing resort in Greenland. But
it does have some great northern lights that you can see in that area. So it could be a tourist threat.
I'm wondering if you've had any conversations or heard anything from like old European counterparties about all of this, and like whether their mood is changing. And I was talking to Susan Glasser about this yesterday, and she was talking to a senior European official who seemed to be legitimately worried about this. He's like, I don't think we're going to fight over Greenland, and said that they're kind of thinking through those contingencies a little bit already. I'm just wondering if you're kind of hearing anything from anyone on the military side. I have in the last year and a half, Tim. I've been very involved with the Nordic and the Baltic countries. Visited there a couple of times. They asked me to speak at the Swedish Defense University, Swedish Defense College, and they were worried at the beginning of the administration. I'm hearing every once in a while I'll get a text from some of the guys from Sweden. In fact, I got one yesterday from a colonel in the Swedish Army who's doing a PhD, and he actually cited one of the Bulwark articles and said, "Thanks for doing this." He says it shows that not everybody is insane in your country. But the Nordics and the Baltics have grown into a powerhouse. They call themselves the Nordic Baltic 8. And in fact, Sweden the other day have reinforced some things they've been saying for the last 2 years, that they ought to start producing nuclear weapons. We're now saying for nations to defend themselves that are advanced nations like Sweden's, they're now considering, hey, this is going so crazy that the only way we can compete with some of these guys, not just Russia, but obviously now the United States, is to produce our own nuclear weapons so we have them under our control. This is exactly why we generated the NATO alliance, to prevent that kind of stuff. For arms going crazy, nations doing their own thing as opposed to doing it as part of the alliance. As sometimes bad as NATO was, and I got to see it for many years within my career, it is a great organization. Yeah, they piddle and diddle and resolve and all those kind of things, but for the most part, it's pretty good in terms of a security alliance of 32 different nations. I mean, it's worked pretty good by comparison to, what came before it, for example.
Right.
While we're discussing that, what's your sense for the latest in Ukraine? I kind of feel like we're in this like never-ending doom loop where the same cycle happens over and over again. But I'm wondering if there's anything that maybe I'm missing as far as like kind of changes on the ground, either in Russia or Ukraine, that might be influencing events right now.
Yeah, there are. What Russia has been doing for the last couple of weeks, ever since the attack into Venezuela, which has really deflected attention away from Ukraine, is they have been increasing the number of ballistic missiles and other type of missiles they've been launching into key areas in Ukraine. Russia has not been gaining any additional ground, but what they're doing is continuing to try and affect the will of the Ukrainian people. So they have been hitting substations for electricity as opposed to just oil producing or electrical producing. They've been hitting substations that lead to towns. I'm in contact with a couple of people over there, Americans that are over there right now. There was a little bit of hubbub about a couple of Americans who had gone over to fight for Ukraine. In the last 2 weeks, there have been 100 Americans killed in Ukraine, and that's not making the news at all. Yeah. There's 20. There's
on the
25
front lines, or where?
On the front lines. Yeah, on the front lines, in buildings that have been bombed. The Ukrainian, right now, it's this morning it was 14 degrees below zero in Kyiv. and their electricity has been shut off and their energy supplies have been shut off because that's the intent of the Russians. They are trying to hurt the civilians in Ukraine. And yet we have diminished our approach to how we're reporting what's going on. And Russia is taking advantage of us being overwhelmed by events in other parts of the world.
Wow, I feel kind of ashamed. I'm looking at this now. Not that I didn't believe you, but I'm just trying to get a sense for what's happening. And yeah, it does. It's 110 Americans, volunteers, have been killed on the Ukrainian side.
Let me read this note I got last night from someone who's over there. The Russians have now seized upon a more effective military tactic. They are firing ballistic missiles, which are hard to fend against, atop hundreds of drones every night into local substations. The few final miles of power to users in Odessa, Kherson, and Kyiv is a huge humanitarian issue. The temperature in Kyiv right now is 3 degrees Fahrenheit. The weather forecast shows this Arctic blast continuing for 14 more days. Generators are in short supply. Pipes are bursting. Civilians are now genuinely scared for their lives. There are no easy fixes to these strikes, according to very well-placed friends in the military. It's all hands on deck, but the conditions are vicious, and the Russian poundings remain nightly unabated. I could give you some more from this guy, but one more thing. Meanwhile, it's been reliably relayed that both Russia and the White House pressured Belgium to not relinquish Russia's $300 billion in frozen assets at Euroclear in Brussels. This is shameful. A loan by the EU was provided to Ukraine in lieu of the White House Kremlin interference in Belgium against leveraging the EU-based frozen assets. I'm told that French President Macron is now demanding that no EU money from the EU loan be used to buy U.S. weapons system. His position is that EU money should be provided to EU defense manufacturers only. Ukraine cannot be encumbered with that kind of condition. So there's all sorts of things that are taking place below the noise level and below the radar that I think are critically important at this particular time. And yet Ukraine continues to stand 4 years into this.
Do you think it's like those conditions are impacting the negotiations at all? It's kind of hard to even see how, right? Because, and I guess it's been a few months now where Ukraine did seem more willing, or Zelensky seemed a little more willing than he had in the past to kind of move to a negotiated resolution, but Putin isn't interested in that.
Right. He's not. Personally, I think the strategy of Zelensky is saying, hey, I'll do anything. I'll negotiate. I'll come to the negotiation table to stop all of these attacks against my population, because he knew specifically that Putin wouldn't come to the negotiating table. And that's the one thing I think the White House doesn't seem to understand. And Witkoff seems to be a partner of Putin. And now Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, is in Venezuela and potentially in Greenland.
Woof. Man, I was in a habit of like checking in the Kyiv Post. I don't know if you ever read that, just every couple days for a while, but just there's been so much, with the holidays, there's so much crazy shit in our world with Venezuela and elsewhere that I hadn't been. And I just kind of opened it right now. And yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot of disheartening news, what you're seeing over there. You have more on this tomorrow. We're doing a thing now, which I appreciate, on the Bulwark Takes feed and on YouTube on Thursdays, which are called Command Post. We're just kind of giving more of these military updates tomorrow. You're going to be talking about this with Bill Crystal. But anything else you want to share about that for folks who might be interested?
Again, I think that as a population, our citizenry is being overwhelmed by a lot of different stories that seem to make us all drop our jaws,
drop our drawers. It's not that exciting, Mark. I mean, we're excited you're doing a new Bulwark Takes thing with us, but I'm not drawer dropping yet. At least we'll see how the one goes tomorrow.
And we're just in disbelief. I mean, every morning we wake up to something more that says unbelievable. Like you were talking about the prosecutors that quit in Minnesota. Another thing, an attack against Powell as the Fed chair. I mean, it's just one more news thing to jam into a news day, and the devil's in the details, and we're being forced to shift from one thing to another and not see the totality of the kinds of things that are going on.
A couple other things before I lose you. The Mark Kelly, just having this conversation made me wonder. I don't know. Are you concerned at all, if, like, with all this time you're spending with me and Bill Kristol, that you might get demoted in retirement? So only being slightly cheeky about that, and also just kind of tell it what the latest is with Mark Kelly. He gave some pretty powerful speeches on that this week.
Yeah, he did, and he and people like Slatkin and others are going to be the targets. Could I potentially be a target? Yeah. My wife is concerned about that all the time. The concern is that if you say anything that has to do with common sense or an analysis of a factual condition, that's contrary to what the administration wants people to hear. So yeah, it's taken a risk as a retired general officer to say these things, but I also think it's somewhat my duty to do that. Anything
else on the Kelly situation that you think is
yeah, I think he is handling it very well. Senator Kelly is actually a friend of mine. We were in contact before he became a senator. He spends a lot of time here in Orlando where I live. I met his wife, Gabby Gifford. So we exchanged notes, and he told me exactly what he was going to do when he said, I'm going to sue. That's going to be a hard case, but I think it's exactly the right thing to do because it deflects the attention away from them going after him to him going after them. And it needs to be said because it's clearly a First Amendment issue, and he's in the right, in my view, and it should be an easy case to win.
I forget if it was the last time you were on or a couple times ago, but we went through Trump brags about all these wars that he solved. It was 7 for a while. There was 8. I think your latest count is 8.25. I don't know exactly what constitutes the quarter, but this is a common Trump talking point. You had debunked that. And I was so pleased with that. We kind of turned it into an article too from last September, just kind of going through, because some of it's so crazy. People are like, what are you even talking about? In some of these situations, what is he even talking about? What is he even referencing? And so you went through all of those. I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to quiz you and ask you to do all 8.25 again, but I do think kind of a little update on where all those other more minor skirmishes stand and what the state of the Trump talking point on solving all these wars is.
Well, I was kind of happy this morning. I saw on Twitter that Daniel Dale, the great fact checker, basically did the same thing. That was one of his fact checks. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said 3 of them are still at a stalemate. 1 of them has had a peace thing signed, but nothing has occurred afterward. There's still killing in the Congo. The uprising there is still going on. There's no difference in Serbia and Kosovo. And truthfully, we've had U.S. forces in Kosovo since the 1990s, the late 1990s, after President Clinton said they're going to be out in a year. They are still going there, and there's still rotations of U.S. forces under a German general in Kosovo to protect the peace. So not a whole lot's changed there. There's still tension in that region. The Kashmir issue between India and Pakistan is not changed all that much. He had the presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia in to allegedly sign a peace treaty about Nagorno-Karabakh, which has been a frozen conflict since the 1990s. Not a whole lot of changes there other than that there's been a piece of paper signed. So, obviously, he didn't completely destroy the Iranian, didn't obliterate the Iranian nuclear facilities because we wouldn't be paying more attention to it now if he had. And there's still problems with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So I don't know which ones he solved or which nations he's brought peace to, but the ones that I conclude that he's talking about, the 7, now 8.25, I don't know where he got the quarter from, have not been solved. And if you track any one of those, or you go on, you hunt down every single one of the major concerns he had or the peace deals he thought he prescribed, none of them have been solved.
The Nile Dam between Egypt and Ethiopia. I don't know.
Still, that was one of them, and that's still problematic. There's still not water flowing. So not even that one. Nope. Sorry.
I haven't checked in on the Nile Dam. All right. Last topic. I know that you've, a lot of this is related to sensitive classified information. And so there's going to be some limits to what you can talk about, but I do at least want to mention it. There's a news story from CNN this week about related to Havana Syndrome. Part of the reasons I want to mention it is because this is a full accountability podcast. And it seems like I was just totally wrong on Havana Syndrome. I thought it was psychosomatic. Like it didn't smell right to me. I thought maybe some of the, there might have been something happened to these people. I wasn't saying they were lying, but I didn't believe it really. And Michael Weiss, who's frequently on the pod, we're going to get him back on again soon, was always like a dog on a bone on this. Like, no, this is real and it is Russia. And I should have listened to the smart people on this, it turns out, because the Defense Department, according to CNN, reportedly spent more than a year testing a device that they believe was making people sick with Havana Syndrome. And we've been, I guess, doing tests at how we could use a similar type device against our foes. So maybe that's wrong. I don't know. What do you kind of just make about how I defined what we know about the situation?
The reports are probably correct in terms of the Defense Department doing testing on devices that they've seen that they believe come out of the Russian Federation and the GRU, which is what Weiss reported. But the truth is bigger than that, and that there are capabilities. They're called non-lethal weapon systems, and they are capabilities that incapacitate your enemies for short period of times, either with audio. Well, there's audio blasting, and there's others. I'll just leave it at that. And in fact, when you and I were talking the other day about it, I misconstrued what you were talking about. I thought you were talking about the reports that came out of Venezuela from a Cuban soldier that said they were incapacitated and their ears were bleeding, and they couldn't do anything because of a sound wave. Well, that's a non-lethal aid. They didn't kill people. But yeah, does the Defense Department have these capabilities? They do. Are they very well classified? Yes, they are. I mean, I can't get into, and again, I'm dated. Some of these things were being tested when I was still wearing the uniform, so I knew about some of them. But, there's all kinds of capabilities in the Defense Department that the American citizens don't know about, and really they have no need to know about them, because then they get in the press and our enemies might take advantage of that. But yeah, I think what was going on I never had a doubt that these were audio weapons being used in Cuba. And I don't think anybody in the administration had any doubt, because they know the capabilities of some of these things.
Did it kind of dampen that story a little bit, like the ways that public, White House officials, way that they talked about Havana Syndrome? It wasn't. They were. Let's just say they weren't like full throated in support of the people that were saying that they had been attacked.
Right, but they never said it didn't happen either.
That's true,
and that's the deniability part of it, because when you talk about it happened, there's more news that can come of that. So, yeah, Weiss was like a dog with a bone on this, and it is fascinating, but there's a whole lot more than that that are in the secret archives of the Pentagon.
You know who else was wrong? I hate having any fucking single thing in common with JD Vance, besides the fact that we were both never Trump bloggers 10 years ago. But JD Vance was trolled Michael Weiss about this, and like quote tweeted him a couple times, saying that like the media's lost their mind with the Russians and their secret audio weapons. And it turns out that I was never that dismissive. And yeah, the current vice president was extremely dismissive of this, mocked Michael, and score that one for Michael Weiss, I guess, and that's another L for JD.
What I would say in defense of JD Vance, I hate to do this.
Oh, come on. There's no defending JD Vance on this podcast. Okay, that's fine.
Well, you're going to like to hear what I say. He probably didn't know. I mean, he probably didn't know. He doesn't have a need to know what's going on in the Pentagon on these kind of things. I mean, he's not an employer of these kind of weapon systems. So there's a lot of things the vice president doesn't know. That's the uniqueness of the classified documents case against Trump, that he was giving people that didn't have a need to know some of these things the knowledge that they shouldn't have.
Good point. Okay, well, in anti-defense of JD Vance, if you don't know something, you shouldn't be condescending about it, and he can't help himself. All right, well, I appreciate you very much. Much more tomorrow. Subscribe to the Bulwark Takes feed or check it out on YouTube if you haven't. It's going to be Command Post with Mark Hertling on Thursdays, and as I mentioned, Sarah's back with the revamped George Conway Explains It All. It's called The Illegal News this week with Asha Rangappa. Subscribe to both of those if you haven't. General Hertling, Appreciate you very much, brother. We'll be talking to you soon.
You got it, Tim. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. It's good to see you with that Tigers hat on, too.
All right. Yeah, go Tigers. Big win for the LSU women's, the Lady Tigers.
It's go Hoosiers. It's go Hoosiers. That's what you should be saying right now.
I'm torn about the Hoosiers and the Canes. Okay. They're a great story, but I got a lot of friends. I mean, Jeff, I got a lot of friends down there in Coral Gables. So I'll be happy for whoever wins.
I'm a Hoosier alum. You knew that, right? I went to grad school at IU.
I did not know that, actually. I know about your high school in St. Louis, but I did not know.
You know about my college. Now you know about my master's program at Indiana University. Go Hoosiers. When nobody went to a football game, they all went to see Bobby Knight play when I was there, or not play, but coach. Yeah,
man, the team looks good. I think maybe part of the other reason why I'm a little bit torn is that they almost look as good as that 2019 LSU Tigers team. And sort of there's a lot of pride around here. That's the best team of or modern times, at least.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Indiana puts it on Miami like they've been doing all these other games, they're going to have a case for that. So anyway, we'll be watching it. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Everybody else, we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the show. I don't know who the guest is going to be yet. We'll figure it out. It'll be somebody good. We'll see you all then. Peace.